I'm going to just do a review of where the IHBC sits within all of this and the kind of resources that the IHBC has to offer. It's a very flat organisation, rather like the sector is very flat. So digital resources are really important to keeping our members connected, keeping the sector connected, getting news items, all of that sort of stuff out there, having resource tools online so people can access them. Because we're thinly spread, the membership of the IHBC is about 2,200, of which about 1,200, 1,100 are full members who've been tested in terms of their skills. So it's a very thinly spread sort of body across the UK, and I think that's one of the reasons why we do look to the online resources quite a bit. So do be very prepared to use our web resources and also to ask us and let us know if they're not exactly what you need or if there's something that you think could be usefully added. One very important person in that whole process is trying out some of this filming stuff as well to kind of enhance our online access or routes to online learning. So this might not ever appear, but we'll see how it goes. So she's very important in terms of making sure that 33,000 pages or so of our website are as easily accessible as possible. It's not easy, but we do what we can in those terms. And so that'll be another important thread through the day. But what I'd start with is just to sort of give a bit of introduction to who we are and what we do. What is the IHBC? We don't have copies of the yearbook here, but if any of us, you contact me or email me, you'll probably, some of you will have it from your courses anyway. But the yearbook gives us an annual review of what the IHBC is doing and is up to. And if you read through or flick through the early sections of that, you see introductions to what the IHBC is and also how it's structured in terms of a very diffuse network of volunteers and a small number of staff, most of whom are actually, all of whom are formal staff are here today, and you'll be meeting them through the day. We have a council, it's a charity, we have a council that's the board of trustees in effect, and then that council has representations from our different branches around the country. So if you join, linking with local networks through your local branches is a very important part of how to develop your personal professional networks and how to actually gain a lot of the skills, because you can only get, we can't emphasize this enough, you can only get so much in your course. Course, 1 or 2 years, it's just a tiny, tiny part of the learning opportunities that you have over this period. And what's really good for you to do is to look at what other learning opportunities there are. Don't just presume it's all going to be in the course. Make the effort to look beyond what the course can offer, because courses are timed by time, by context, by structures. You've got to develop your own sort of threads of learning through that as well. And this day is meant to be a help in terms of that. But one of the key things is going through branches that actually have the kind of local networks that will give you the advice. And most of our people are involved in branches locally quite actively as well. So you may know some of the people locally from that. So we have also have our national committees which deal with headline structural issues like education. Henry is now the chair of our Education, Training and Standards Committee, like policy, policy which deals with those sort of issues around how we actually manage the processes of taking care of our heritage. Communications and outreach, which Alison is very much involved with in terms of saying, how do we communicate? How do we give the tools that help communication? All of these sort of come together as a kind of, well, we hope they come together as perhaps it's more melange than anything else, that actually tries to produce the services that help people with an interest in careers in the sector. In terms of our operations and things, we've a very wide range of members coming from very different backgrounds. As I say, about 2,200 at various different levels of membership. Affiliate is in effect the entry level, which is the starting point to get the basic services. But our members come from areas that include anything from architecture, chartered surveying, history, my background is more history, town planning with Fiona and Kate, and I do town planning as well. And we all have sort of lots of different threads of skill sets and interests as well. So our membership collectively has that interdisciplinary infrastructure to it that we think is very much part of the learning process that underpins conservation practice. You're not just your own discipline of architecture or your mainstream discipline, you're aware of at different levels all the other issues and occurrences and considerations that impact on conservation outcomes, and that lets you give better advice, better works, better understanding of what conservation is about. And we think that's a very important part of the makeup of the Institute as well. So our members come from different backgrounds and they come from different sort of levels of employment. And you can get an interesting understanding of that from looking at our LinkedIn group, which gives a breakdown of the different sectors that people come from as well. And why we'll be talking about IHBC at its heart to start off the discussions today is because the kind of stuff that we talk about is very much what conservation is about as far as we're concerned. There's two real kind of bases for our operations. One of them is the ICOMOS training and guidelines in conservation, guidelines in conservation training from 1993 that really talk about these kind of skill sets that you need, that they consider conservation and professionals need. And they talk about the different disciplines that have to be coordinated in terms of the practice. That's really the heart of any skills assessment for conservation that you will come across. And all your courses, to one degree or another, will take on board some of the issues in those guidelines. And you'll see them referred to on our website extensively as well. And another of the tools that sort of pervades that sort of learning is the thing you see here, the British Standard Guide to the Conservation of Historic Buildings, BS 7913, which has become an important tool, just a tool for a certain part of the threads of conservation that are a key consideration. So people who are particularly involved in the changes to conservation or heritage resources, people who are involved at that end tend to actually sort of look to that quite a lot. But a lot of the time it's actually just a professional judgment, because so much of the time it's about the circumstances, so much of the time it's about the particular situation. And that's why, again, why we sort of say thinking around bringing in as much and as wide a range of information and skills as you can. And that's what one of the key tools that we use in terms of kickstarting understanding and conservation for people who are interested in this. That's one of the points of this tool, which used to be called the Web Starter. It's now called the Self Starter. And what it is, it's available on our website, linked from our home page, and it's really just an accessible interface into, as I say, the 30,000 or so pages that we have online. And styled so it's a little bit easier to find your way around if you're coming particularly from a kind of an educational background. We're going to talk through that, and I gave you the links in the guidance that we sent out. We're going to talk through that to kickstart discussions this morning, the different threads that are raised there, just to look at the kind of things that we do, because those kind of things are in effect the fundamentals of conservation. All of those bits may be important, and one of the key things is actually how you access those, how you get to the bit of information that you need. And this gives you a useful survey of those wide-ranging resources. And the starting point for that, really, and do feel free to work through on your phone if you want to these, because obviously the screen is relatively small. The starting point is drawing people into the character of what happens when people are doing conservation. And one of the easiest ways, and absolutely free for you and your fellow students, is to look to the social media resources, because they're accessible to anyone. The LinkedIn group, for example, gives you an idea of the kind of discussions that professionals might be engaged with. It gives you updates on events and news from IHBC and from anyone who's sort of posting in those sort of details. And we have, in terms of those sort of areas of interest, things there like if you want to get involved with volunteering, you might talk to Kate, and we give the context of that. Kate Kendall, back it down there a bit. Kate Kendall, who's over there, who's our Learning, Education, Training and Standards, or LETS officer, and she'll say a few words later on. So we're just getting the news out and getting the information out in those terms. And so you getting involved there, you begin to understand the discussions that people might be having. And then we go on to issues like where do you go around getting experience? How do you go about getting experience within your career? Well, the second of those panels in the self-starter talks about that, and it covers areas that range from publications, news items. Anyone can look on our homepage on our website and see what current news is, and you can check on the things that we call news blogs there as well, and see what's sort of coming up on that. And it also gives you basic introductions to the publications and our local networks. Our publications you have spread around the table, some of them, some of you will know these already. Feel free to take those home if you don't have one, or if you think you'd find it useful. There's some more copies up here and some more other sort of guidance on that. Particularly important are our issues of context, because they give you a very wide-ranging survey of just what's happening in the sector pretty much currently. The news items on the website, the news blogs, are sort of almost day-to-day information. The context gives you a more solid review, and it's also, of course, accessible online for free once it's gone past its initial 6-month timeline. So you can do very good searches online to find out details or information, and I think that's an important research tool that's very worth bearing in mind if you're thinking around your dissertations. Another one that isn't available online is our yearbook as well, but as I say, that can be made accessible to you. We'll post that out to you on request as well. Just get in touch with me. That gives an annual review of the sector, includes items, as all of these do, items from members and non-members as well, because we see very much that wider purview around what affects conservation. We also have there 7913, which I've just showed you, but we've also been developing new research and guidance notes, which are linked from a facility called our toolbox, which is linked from the homepage as well. And the research and guidance notes are very specific, really quite high level, mostly quite high level guidance on practice and practical issues, and cover things from urgent works notices to one that will be coming up that's a much more general one that we think will be of use in the not too distant future, is from Alison, who will be talking a bit about how you develop your guidance on how you develop your professional network and career and profile online as well. So we're really trying to kind of offer out sort of stage support guidance for a lot of different levels within these processes. And the research notes are linked to a lot of the research that we or our members do in one form or another, so it can be quite technical as well. But if you're doing a technical piece of analysis in your dissertation, for example, that's another thing that you might want to look at and through. Linked from that sort of initial early page is also sort of the range of different areas of practice and operations that members might get involved with, and that reaches across in particular to the local branch network that I mentioned before. When you join, if you join IHBC, we get you into a branch so that you have not only the national infrastructure of context and yearbook, but also the local networks. And I think these are really important because actually, they're very extremely, well, we're all cost effective, but they're extremely cost effective, but they're also personal in the way that we can be. I mean, we can be a bit personal today, I suppose, but by and large, it's the branches that will give you the individual personal networks that you can actually sort of draw threads from there. And they are obviously regionally based as well, because that's often the kind of networking that's available within these sort of operations as well. within those sort of processes as well, in those sort of early stages of just introducing sort of issues, learning is a key part within those sort of processes. And within the learning, we cover quite a range of things that include, that's too small, we include guidance on CPD, continuing professional development, and our CPD forms are extremely important for guiding the self-assessment of your skills needs, even before you're required to do them, which you are as a full member of the IHBC. But even before that, if you go through our CPD forms, it encourages a kind of a self-reflection of what your skill sets are. And I think that very usefully highlights areas that you might want to consider developing in more detail as well. And of course, on that careers side of things, we also, within those services, and again it's accessible for free, we have our jobs etc., what we call our jobs etc. page, which mainly alerts to actual formal roles, but does include requests or calls for trustees and the like occasionally as well, and our members get email alerts when these are advertised. And now of course you can sign up for them as well. Isn't that right, Joanna? You don't have to be a member.
No, if you just go to the page, you'll see at the top there's a sign up, so you can just...
And that's quite a good way of just keeping au fait with what's going on. We do have another page not mentioned here, I'm not sure if it's mentioned here, but it's the student awards and an awards page. We include awards, bursaries, trustee roles that you might want to get involved with, more the voluntary rather than the paid roles by and large. And that's another sort of thread of capacity building for the sector that we get involved with. That's just the details on the CPD, so I won't get too much involved in that. And then on the news blogs, which I mentioned, these are the day-to-day news that comes out. We send out at the moment 2 lists of alerts a week to members with about 10 to 12 relevant news items on each of items we consider relevant. And that's just for the convenience of the members. Actually, anyone can go and look and indeed search on the news blogs. The idea of the news blogs was first and foremost for our members to keep them up to date, but actually as students, when you're doing research, these now have something like, is it 7,000 or 8,000 news items over 7 or 8 years at this stage. So if you're looking for information on more recent issues, or indeed more general issues, a search on the news blog search facility is something that can really help just pin down quickly, particularly around the policy areas, the activities areas, can help pin down some sort of key documents or key moments. I can do quite a good detailed history of a policy development over the last 5 years in about, I don't know, 20 minutes or half an hour just by picking up a search on the news blog. So it's really useful. I think it's become a really useful tool. It was in our vision early on because we developed it as an archive as well. Also linked there is the guidance on volunteers and careers and how you actually can move or might be able to move your careers forward. We offer details there. We noticed a bit with Henry the kind of breadth of roles and things like that, but we also have links from that section into career advice, prospects. This is still talking about the web starter introduction, by the way, so we're still in the early stages of these sort of processes. But on the careers side of things, website resources.